Welcome to the Not Null podcast. I'm just an AI voice, but here are your real hosts, Kevin Doyle, Paul Bratzlovsky, and Bobby Davis.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Not Null podcast, the tech podcast where we talk about everything from AI to VR and robots to flying cars. I'm Kevin Doyle, and this week I am joined by Bobby Davis and Paul Bratzlovsky. Coming up in this week's episode, NVIDIA Ace, is it the future of gaming? Microsoft launched Copilot Pro, and one of my previous Not Null recommendations, Artifact, is shutting down. And then we'll wrap up with our Null, Not Null recommendation section, where we recommend or recommend that you avoid a product or service. Before we jump into today's stories then, did you guys see that Apple hit the top of the worldwide market share of phones shipped in 2023 for the first time ever, beating out Samsung? So they took 20.1% of the market share in 2023. They were 18.8% the year before, whereas they kind of reversed with Samsung. Samsung was 21.7 in 2022, and they're now 19.4. So they switched places. I think we've known for a long time that this is the case in the US, right? The US is obviously a heavy market for Apple, but this is worldwide sales taking over Samsung.
Yeah, I was looking at that number and I was surprised because I know that China was banning the iPhone in government institutions. I know China's a big part of that. So they must be selling phones all over the world, like in other places.
Well, I don't think it's banned in China as a country, though, is it? Even though it's just the government that are using it, I think you can still buy them there. But I'm guessing the other part of the story here was kind of like the devices themselves. So the number one selling device in the world was an $1,100 iPhone 14 Pro Max. That's crazy, bearing in mind that an average iPhone costs, if you group them all together, costs just under $1,000. An average Android phone costs $250. I guess it shows you that a lot of people are buying expensive phones, and they're probably sold a lot in the West, I would guess, even though a lot of devices are sold in other countries, which is the reason why at number 5, you're seeing Transition listed there as a manufacturer. I'd never heard of them before I read the story. They make phones that are primarily sold in Africa. So there's the rest of the brands on here outside of Apple and Samsung. Those are the rest of the world. But the fact that Apple was able to top this list on global sales, I found that like almost unbelievable.
Yeah, and then it's just the two phones, Samsung and Apple's pretty much the dominant list, and then the Chinese phone.
Right, and that's what you get then. You get the rest of the world phones, which is interesting because this is on pure volume. This isn't on spend, right? This is on pure volume. This is number of units,
right? So
it's the number of units that they ship. So they ship more units than anybody else, even at a higher price point. But hey, it's good for stock, right?
Motorola's not in there. No LG phones.
No, they're in this other category. Let's jump into our first story then for this week. So let's talk about NVIDIA Ace, and is it the future of gaming? So during CES, NVIDIA demoed a new system called NVIDIA Ace. The idea here is that NPCs or non-playable characters in a game don't have to have a fixed dialogue tree using this technology. So it's a combination of an LLM and a voice synthesizer and a 3D model like renderer, and it can make an NPC character within your game talk about literally anything. You can ask it any questions. There is a demo video, which I will link in the show notes and in the description, that you can go watch, and you can talk to this NPC character and it will answer you back talking about anything. So the demo showed he was a cook in a cyberpunk style cafe, and you kind of walk in and you can talk to him. So in the demo, they asked him about working conditions for staff. They asked him like, hey, what does your boss do to you this week? And the guy answered back like, no, I'm the boss. I run this place. So I guess you could ask him like about a sporting event or something, which would be kind of cool. I think you can in theory ask him almost anything. So the way this works, I guess each NPC has like a fully thought out persona, right? It can be fed a full detail as to, hey, here's who you are. Here's how you're supposed to answer this back. So it has some kind of guardrails on it. But imagine something like Cyberpunk, which has a massive amount of NPCs in it as it is, but they kind of have dialogue trees and they kind of do their own thing a little bit. But Paul, I know you're a massive fan of that game. Is this a feature Would it interest you?
Yeah,
a game like that?
yeah. Where do I sign up? I'm ready. All the characters, like girlfriends. I mean, like cyberpunk characters for sure. It'll be amazing. I'm not saying I'm lonely and I need someone to talk to. I mean, in the game, I'm pretending I'm interacting, of course, with the game.
It's the character.
Yeah, it's a
The
character for sure. Like, are you kidding me? Me being pretty single, like, come on. But yeah, if that comes out, I wonder, like, if you could kind of set the personas, like, like,
I wonder.
very loving individual who always answers yes to like my complaining. And
you can. It has. I looked at some of the back end tools for this. I was looking at it, and they were showing you how you train it, and they have things like toxicity 0 to 10, helpfulness 0 to 10.
Oh wow!
Funny 0 to 10, and you can kind of mix it in, and then test it with different prompts to see how it responds. To you can dial in the personality in addition to the backstory, which is like kind of like training an LLM on the back end. There's a bunch of technologies that are doing this.
Yeah.
So Convey is the company that renders out the characters part. That's where the LLM part comes from. But then, as far as like getting routed from that to an Unreal Engine, there's a lot of things that happens: text to speech, speech to text, synthesis. And it's pretty impressive, man. And it's like really cool. I can imagine someone, and this is my $1 million idea, that someone creating a persona to be the help desk for a large corporation, and you just dial in on Teams and you call the help desk, and then that persona answers.
Yeah, that's definitely happening.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it can, and with actions and integrated things like that, if you had your everything rendered together, they could reboot a computer maybe remotely. They could set a policy for the network or something like that. Me and Kevin were joking around. We were talking about it's like, you just imagine you call the help desk. Hey, tell me the gossip going around the office. Like, what's going on? Like,
It'd be great.
But the crazy thing, I know when we started the first episode, you're like, oh, AI is not going to take over our jobs and take over the world. And with every day, there's always something that they're like introducing. It's like, oh, and now you're like, in your example, it's like, oh, the help desk person no longer is needed.
Will be for some degree, like, but I think for a lot of things, like, and I think the same amount of help desk people will be there. It's just that the help desk wants to have to answer the annoying lady or the annoying guy down the hall that doesn't know how to turn the computer on or off.
Yeah, well, it replaces kind of the boring like in chatbot thing, doesn't it? That you get like the text AI that's just boring. This is actual like person or a persona you speak to. Just feels more personal.
Yeah, but apparently this has better guardrails than what I've been seeing with training OpenAI's your own chatbot or whatever. That's not been very good. I mean, like, I've tried it. I mean, maybe I could train it better, but here there's more guardrails to keep it centered on like who it is and what they know about and how they answer.
You could feed it a massive backstory about a character.
Massive.
Yeah, it's when the Tesla robots come out and you're able to feed that into them and they're humanoid, and it's just, man, like, are we coming to the end of the world faster and faster? Because we're going to have like robots. They're going to be like talking to you about the work conditions at the restaurant. You're like, oh God, I just want to play my video game. And you're here complaining about like, who's the owner, who's the boss? Like it's like, imagine like you go to NPC and you just like want to continue the game. And the NPC is like, no, I don't want to like keep going.
It could.
That'll be hilarious. It's like, but
I think you'll see some new games come out. And so I read some comments on some of the YouTube videos about this just to see what other people were talking about. And there was a lot of people interested in an open world RPG that was all NPCs. And I was thinking through that. It
is interesting.
I don't know if that would work, but I guess if you wove a world building around it.
Yeah, it redefines what a game is, doesn't it? Because a game is usually like has game goals and has something you push towards. But you've said this before, Paul. You like Cyberpunk not because of the game elements of it, essentially, but because of the open worldness and what you can do in that open world. You just go in it and just experience it.
So the thing that I'm thinking about, Westworld, that's happening at some point. Maybe not in our lifetime, but that's going to be a thing. 100%. And if anybody saw all the seasons before it got canceled, what the end result of that show was, And the end result, I'm going to spoil it for everybody. Anybody here is willing to watch Westworld? The last, anybody raise your hand? No?
Skip for the next 30 seconds. Paul's going to spoil it.
Spoiler alert.
The last episode, there's no more humans left.
Oh.
That, sorry to spoil it for those of you who were anticipating. And the next season was supposed to be like what it's like living in the post-human world, I think. And to me, I think it's a fine line of like, I am actually excited for all these cool things that are coming out, but I think there's got to be a responsibility where if, like, think about it this way, if there's people already falling in love with chatbots like Replica AI, the more real that they become. And when you talk to a chatbot, you're literally talking to your own like echo chamber because it's specifically going to be designed and tailored to you. And so like you're always going to have very nice interactions. And I kind of wonder, like, as humans, are we going to be able to keep this distinction between like talking to my friend versus talking to like an AI generated persona that is not human at all? It doesn't have like, it doesn't care for me, it just says what it's programmed to. And then that becomes like a deep philosophical question. If it treats you nice but doesn't care, does it even matter? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
That's the subtext of the second Blade movie, you know, with Ryan Gosling's character carrying around the AI.
I cried in that movie, just saying. When they stepped on her and broke her, I was like, oh no. Because I felt attacked. But that's the thing. I fell in love with that character of the AI person. And I was just like, wow, that's like, this is what they're building. So there's a bunch of people that are excited. And then there's a bunch of people that are really excited. I think that's what's happening.
The other thing that the common thread that ran through all the chats about gaming in general, they were saying that while they liked the NPC part of it, the voice acting wasn't as good, and they fear that the games will cheap out and not hire real voice actors. So if you ever played Arkham City, Mark Hamill's portrayal of the Joker is probably could have won awards for that. So like, and then
but I agree, it will become more rare to do that.
Yeah.
It will. As it gets better and better, it will become rarer for voice actors to be in games. It really will.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm so pessimistic that like I only see like the worst implementation. Like for instance, like if I have a friend, like my AI could talk to his AI and that's it. And we don't really have to communicate with each other. And maybe like summarize, like, well, did they really change this? Like, I mean, what I'm interested in, what kind of impact it's going to have, for instance, like, I mean, I like all this cool technology, but what if you draw the line in terms of like, are people going to continue to interact with other humans, or are they going to rely on these AI systems to get everything done, including like having someone tuck you in at night and tell you a nice story, I guess?
I think people will still crave human interaction because I think it only can get so far. There's always going to be an uncanny valley between them, And even watching this, as impressive as it is a little flat on the performance side. If you watch it, it's not as good as, the voice acting of Kevin Conroy that does Batman. So like, just not as good.
But I think that is going to get better.
It'll get
That's
better.
the thing. It's
like
better
than it's ever been.
V0 or V1, and then it's like, it's not going to get
one of
worse
those
from
cases.
here.
No. This is one of those cases where we've seen a rapid like, oh, that's actually passable now, and it's just going to get better and better. It's really the start of like, this is really the beginnings of like Ready Player One, isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine having this environment here where you put on a VR headset and you just jump into this cyberpunk world. Like this is that movie. This is characters wandering around that aren't real people. There'll be a point where you're not going to know, is that a person on the other end of that wearing a headset, or is that not? Is that an in-game character? There'll be a point where that's going to be unrecognizable between the two.
You mean all the poker sites, where you think you're playing against humans and you're not?
Yes.
But the seven guys at the table are all cheating.
So here's an interesting thing. Like, you could play like Call of Duty or, Battlefield. And a lot of the games, if the server doesn't have enough humans, they'll have bot players and they'll have like
100%.
usernames, like as if they're like a real person. And then you see
100%.
them, like do something stupid. Like that's obviously a bot. And so I wonder if, majority of the interactions, like we're going to think we're playing with other players, but it's just like really good bots.
Yes. I think that's
trash
true.
to you, like the 6-year-old that's like, your mama is that.
It will, because I think there is a virtual world where that will work.
I know.
I think there genuinely is.
It's insane.
Yeah. We're
I'm
not that far away.
convinced, like, I'm going to tell you what I saw in the last week. This is going to be my not know for the week. I just to spoil it because we're talking about bots. But I have a Peloton bike, and recently in the last month or so, I started getting back into cycling again. And I noticed when I would take pre-recorded classes, 10 to 15 people would show up at the same time I was. I'm like, well, that's really cool. There's that many people riding this bike at this time taking this course, and there's thousands of courses. And so then I took 3 or 4 courses in a row. So every day I was biking, and some days I would take 2 at once. And it was the same username in here, like on multiple days at the same time I was. And I thought, oh, it's a bot. And what the bot would do was chase right behind me. I would always beat this bot.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
But it would make me work harder. It was very interesting, I think. And that I don't think that's been proven by Peloton. Maybe I'm crazy. And maybe,
that
this
sounds
guy
right.
is just happened to be on the same time I'm doing it, So it's kind of funny. And I felt like it was really cool use of bot where it was always pushing me. Like he would pass me and then I was like, oh, I'm going to pass him back, and like that kind of stuff. So I worked harder.
He's telling this story to his friends like right now. He's like, man, I joined Peloton. This bot kept beating me. Like,
So funny.
So
yeah, interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, we've got interesting times to come. I think we're redefining what a video game can actually be.
Yeah.
Will people spend time in a virtual world with NPCs like this? I think so.
Oh, 100%. Like, and I've been talking to Kevin for years about the game that I would like to build, the thing I want to build. And I want to build a holodeck type of experience. That's the game I want to play. I want to play a Destiny raid in real life, run around, jump on a box, shoot stuff, feel pain, feel sweat, get tired, solve the puzzles in real time and real space. That's what I want to do. That's the game I want to play.
Listen, I think this is going to go out of control. Imagine the game like The Sims. It's like you have a sim character that's your wife, and all of a sudden things don't work out. She's expecting way more, but you just don't feel like giving it. And then so she files the papers, you get divorced. Then you got to pay alimony. I mean, good Lord.
What about if your Sims character also, and you're in a VR version of Sims, let's say, right? What if your Sims character then jumped into VR? How far are you, like you're 2 degrees down then? Can you play VR in VR? Like, it's kind of crazy.
So here's the thing, like Ready Player One, like that movie Matrix, Terminator. Before, when I was growing up as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, these are such a cool stories. And now I'm like looking at those stories like apocryphal, whatever, I can't pronounce that word, but like someone predicted the future and that's actually going to happen. It's like Nostradamus was wrong, but all these like sci-fi writers, they're right on point. Exactly. This is so like the stretch. Like before, I used to say the tech will never be there, but now like I can't say that because the tech is almost there. Maybe it's 50 years, maybe it's 100 years, but I know for a fact it's going to happen.
You can now see it can happen.
Yeah, you could see it's so easy to connect the dots, and that's to me is just so impressive. Like it's insane.
But I think it's cool. I mean, definitely. I think these bring in a new generation of games where you can talk to it and your actions matter more than your ability to, as I say, rock the twin sticks or whatever, with your Xbox controller or your mouse.
I got the best idea for video games because kids listen to video games. They love video games, but they don't want to talk to the parents at all. There should be an extra service where as a parent, you give the video character like wisdom, like that they regurgitate to their kid. It's like, after you kill those monsters, and remember, making your bed is what's important every time in the morning. They're like, what the hell? Well, I guess I should listen to you because you're a video game character that I value more than my parents. That makes sense. All of a sudden, your kid's making the bed, and you're like, yeah, son of a gun. I told you that, but you stupid kid. But additional service. That's what video game companies used to do. Like characters that are based on their
supervision
parents.
in the game. They put their backstory in the game, and there's the thing. Keep the kids on the guardrail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk Microsoft Copilot, and in this case, Copilot Pro. So, Microsoft Copilot launched a few months back. It is basically their version of kind of ChatGPT plus some other stuff. So, it's actually available. You can go to copilot.microsoft.com and you can run Copilot on the web. It's also available or built into the latest version of Windows 11 if you have it, built in as a sidebar. Right, so that's regular Copilot. Everybody can get that if they want. There's no cost to doing that. But now Microsoft has launched something called Copilot Pro. This is a $20 a month service, or if you're a business, it's $30 a month. It is described as, and this is a quote, it is described as a new premium subscription for individuals that provides a higher tier of service for AI capabilities. Brings Copilot AI capabilities to Microsoft 365 personal and family subscribers, and new capabilities such as the ability to create Copilot GPTs. So a couple of other features. It understands context across devices, which is great. So if you're using it on the web, on the PC, on the phone, it'll understand context and have history of that. That's cool. But it importantly adds Copilot in 365 apps. This is the big thing that everyone's been waiting for, right? Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, whatever you're using, 365 apps, Copilot's going to be baked in if you pay for this subscription. Gives you priority access to the latest version of ChatGPT as well. So if you want GPT-4 Turbo, this is a way to get GPT-4 Turbo without an OpenAI ChatGPT subscription. And gives you enhanced AI image creation through, I forget what they're calling it now, but basically the Bing creation, image creation tool that they've rebranded. And you can build your own GPTs. Remember, this is going to be, I'm assuming, identical to the GPTs you can build on OpenAI. It's the same tech. Don't forget, OpenAI is everything behind this. It's all ChatGPT backed, right? So it's the same thing with a Microsoft kind of skin on top of it. So, Bobby, I know you have a ChatGPT subscription, and I have one too. Would you replace that with this? Is this considered a replacement? Is it enough of a feature set? Is it interesting?
I'm going to so before the podcast, you give these stories out, right?
Yep.
And I read this story and I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. And then I heard you explain it. I'm like, it is the same thing I already have, except it'd be in PowerPoint.
It's in more places.
I'm already paying $20. So I just need to, I think I would. I think I'm going to be a Copilot Pro, because then things in PowerPoint could be useful.
Yep.
The thing that it lags behind for is image creation. It's not as good.
Agreed.
But I made a Pop Funko with this tool, and I sent it to you, and it has like a Mad Lib style interface.
Yep.
And it was really, really, a lot of people were making themselves a Pop Funko, and I did the same thing. But when I sent it to people in my Discord play group that I play with, they actually thought I had a Pop Funko made. I'm like, no,
and it was that convincing. It was really good.
Unless you really looked into the details, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think if they make image creation, it'd be better. Is it going to be good in PowerPoint? I do make some PowerPoints for teaching and stuff like that. Would it help me? I don't know. But since I'm already paying $20, I might as well try it. Would it help me in Outlook craft emails? Maybe.
Yep.
But since I'm in, so it's closer to the apps that I want to use it in, instead of going out to ChatGPT and kind of do it. The one thing that lacks in Office that I just can't get over, and this is my complaint about Office, which we own Office, but me and Kevin are always working in Google Docs. Why? Because you can we can type on the same document at the same time. You just can't do that in Word, or at least not well.
It's not as good.
No.
The Google Docs it just works. It's just easy. I think you can do it in Word. It's just cumbersome.
Yeah.
It's
in fact, I was looking at the Fluent framework that's coming out, which is they have this Fluent framework Microsoft's putting out that says, hey, build collaborative experiences and work on the same doc at the same time. I'm like, are y'all putting this in Word? I mean, because I really want to learn how to use this, but Google Docs is where it's at,
Yep.
So yeah, I think I'd definitely switch. Definitely going to.
The one thing that I'm curious about, and we're beyond privacy anyway, but that means if it has access throughout all the Windows devices and Office 365, and it's just in Windows, that means it will see all your emails. It's going to see everything in order to have that context. And I think
Correct.
people have to be okay with that.
Well, if you're using Office now, and we have Outlook on a hosted Exchange server, I feel like Microsoft could see our emails now. ChatGPT could look at different things, I guess. I don't know if it's going to look at emails to give you context around certain things, but
it will. And don't forget, if you buy the business version of this, it will do that across your,
because that's where my Office is.
Exactly.
So,
it'll do that across the entire company. That's the thing too. So it'll take into context everything, I believe. I don't know how that works in terms of because it's taking the business as a whole. How does that work in terms of it's reading your email, it's reading my email? Can I ask a question about your email, and would it know the answer, and would it allow? There's a lot of things there. People are going to try and jailbreak this thing, I think, on a company level to try and get the GPT to kind of find out information that maybe you shouldn't find. If you work in a big company and a bank owns this, you can be like, hey, what did the CEO do last week? And you can, I can access his calendar. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
The thing is whenever you ask any question or anything that you want it to do for you, it doesn't happen locally on your computer. There's a request that goes out to their servers. That means that they need to take whatever you said and your data and process it in some sort of way. And so, of course, 100% they're logging everything. And so the issue is, it's like, for me, I'm not saying that I wouldn't use it. I'm just saying people should be aware that everything that you have private, like, it's going to be processed somewhere else. And like, hopefully Windows and Microsoft or whoever, they have really good system around keeping your data safe. But there is a thing that you need to be aware of. And I think they used to say in a ChatGPT, I don't think they say it anymore, where they say don't like put private data when you're like chatting, because, just be aware of that. And I think that's something that a lot of people should be aware of, is that whatever you say, it has to go off your computer. And it's like, how much you trust them. And maybe you trust Microsoft, but what happens if they get hacked? Is there like access to whatever that data, or like, and maybe
Agreed.
that's, in when, we have the 1984 type of world, or like Brave New World with all the stuff and drugs, they'll be able to like, well, we were going to give you this credit loan, but you had these conversations that don't really match with what we think the direction of the country is going. And so maybe we're going to not give you this loan today. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think the technologies that are out there, almost like it's like impossible to have privacy at this point.
Well, this is the thing. It could happen.
Right.
Is the point.
But
right. It's not that you think that it might, but it could. It's technologically that it could.
Yeah. What's wild to me is that we're willing to take convenience over whatever the chances. Is it 1%, 2% chance, like 10% chance of something terrible happen? But we'll take convenience over like, well, who cares? Maybe it'll happen. Probably won't. Just give us the convenience now.
No, what you just said, I guarantee will happen. They'll put AI in loan approval. There's no doubt in my mind they'll do that. If they haven't already started doing it, they're going to do it. And then they'll try to load in different payment histories and things like that, trying to uncover fraud. They've already been doing that for like 10 years, trying to like run models against fraud things to see, but they'll do the same thing in mortgage things. And there's a company out there that I know the guy that's the CEO of this, and they're trying to hook together banks and share data for the purpose of fraud. But once you give a centralized location that kind of data, it's like game over, especially if it's shared with the government as far as like privacy.
Yeah, I'm just curious. To me, it almost seems with all this technology and all this data being given outwardly and used by these huge corporations and the government, like whatever, and not us having privacy, and then AI, for instance, taking over certain jobs at some point, I almost see that it's impossible to stay. And I'm not saying this as a political thing. I just try to, in my mind, kind of justify like what's not the worst case scenario, but this idea of our government not changing in some way where it becomes more of a, I don't want to say socialistic society. I don't know if that's the proper term, but this idea is that like if 60% of the force, let's say, is automated, and we have all these technologies that make our lives comfortable, that we don't need anything. Like I'm kind of like, I didn't think through this enough, but like I just kind of wonder where's the future going in terms of like, and how are we going to prevent it from happening? Because I feel like there's all these huge corporations, they're taking advantage of AI because they have the resources. And I'm almost like, I can't play that game on their level. So I can't even create a service that will compete with them unless I'm using their service.
I don't know, though. There's some other things that are coming down the pipe where a lot of people want to run LLMs locally. And so I was watching a video the other day about WASI, which is the WASM server infrastructure, and they're running LLMs locally on a MacBook. And so I do think that people are wanting to run these LLMs locally. I don't think they necessarily want to give it to OpenAI at this point. but it's kind of the only game in town right now. So I think this will take another pendulum shift where it's like, yeah, I like that, but I want to run it locally. That's a lot of the people, the guy that's running boot camp is saying he's anti-cloud now because he says it's actually cheaper to run our own servers, and he's bringing it back in. So in technology, we always have these come in full circles, and I was talking to some of the guys here at CoderFounder. We're saying, in 2015 to 2019, everything's client side. And then you look at the state of web in 2024, and every major framework says, what we really need to solve is server side components. And it's like, well, we've been doing server side since 2000. So now so I think this running copilots, I think Microsoft will eventually, because everyone's going to say, yeah, I like the copilot thing. I kind of would pay you, but I need the LLM locally because what we work on, we don't want to share in the cloud.
And I think that is going to be part of the solution, but I feel like those LLMs are going to be provided by the big companies because they have pre-existing data. And in order to and the data is the key for these LLMs. And to train the models, the amount of data that you need is the cost is in the millions, if not trillions of dollars. So me, you, or a bunch of my friends, even if we decide to pull our resources, we'll never be able to get data as good as let's say a corporation with millions of dollars. And so we still kind of priced out of playing at that level, which I don't mind too much, but the fact that it is a thing,
maybe at some point though too, maybe there's some kind of wouldn't it be great if there was some kind of a set training data set that was
they already have those, yeah, for sure.
I'm just talking about a public one that everybody was forced to use, the government Llama. Or somebody says it's just hey, here's this set. This is the only data set you're allowed to use to train your LLMs because this is the only stuff that's legally allowed because of copyright, because of inclusions, exclusions, whatever. People have said, if they don't want to be included in it, they're not included in it. And that's the only data set that every company can use. Then the LLM doesn't really matter because the training set is the same for everybody.
And what's crazy coming back to this, I was really excited for the Midjourney and DALL-E 3. And I was like, it's kind of cool. But the more I use it, the more I see there's no originality. And the more I see how they totally screwed some creators. And there's got to be some sort of, because I asked it to generate a bunch of characters for me and like sci-fi characters. And I gave some prompts. One literally looked like the Doom guy from Doom. And the other one looked like Terminator from Terminator. I'm like, bro, there's you cannot make a stretch that this is not what it's based on. I'm like, there's zero creativity. I just took the data I had and I just mashed it together. And I'm like, God.
And I think ultimately this is why AI will always approach replacing artists, and it will replace some artists. But the guys on the top end will never be replaced because the AI needs them.
If I was an artist right now, though, I would not share any of my stuff publicly. I would be too scared unless I literally meet the way I would do it literally is, and I mentioned this before, if someone who has the resources, this would be a good service for you, is to create a service for artists where you train their own LLM model that they control. And the way their users interact with this art is not, hey, artist, create this art for me. It's no, here, let me use my LLM and ask what you want, and it'll create it for you.
I think you're going to be able to get paid for these things. I think that's what the OpenAI store is all about. I do think that you'll be able to eventually create these things. When you look at Convey, when we talked about the first story, that's about creating your own characters. It's just that they're abstracting the complexity away of training these things, and then you bring your creativity and you bring the story, you bring the thing. I think that's kind of where it's going. I think Kevin talked about this, while Kevin works for us here at Coder Foundry, and we are AI prompting all of our cards now for YouTube. Yeah. We didn't replace Kevin.
Someone's still going to do
it. But we did replace Shutterstock.
Yeah.
Which,
right.
So it's like we were talking about the other day, that Shutterstock, we used to use that every day, where we use it less and less, and everything's coming out of Midjourney or a combination of things that we do. And what I will say this too, one more thing, Paul, I made a card for a LinkedIn article and I struggled with it, whereas Kevin doesn't struggle with it. He just makes these cards for the Not Know podcast and Coder Foundry, and it's they always look really good. I spent 6-7 hours on my card prompting this dumb AI thing, trying to get it right, literally. when I should have just went to Shutterstock and got the stock image anyway.
Yeah.
Or just said, hey, Kevin, I need a card that looks like this. But I wanted to make it, surely I can prompt it. It's just, it still takes an artist, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, but so the thing is now you're using a service that is created. And like an example, like I saw a good talk by Andrew Ning, who's like a big like AI like teacher. He's like really famous. And he talked about like this idea that one example he said, like a lot of these companies that used to have novel solutions now became like very easy to replicate by these like big companies to add it to their own kind of like feature set for. And the example he used, when the iPhone came out, someone created a simple app which allow you to turn on the light. And then Apple's like, you know what, we'll just make it a feature. And so the idea is like there were so many companies that came out like that help with AI writing or AI this. And then all of a sudden, like one of the big companies with the major resources, they just created their own version that's a lot more convenient for the users to use, that they literally killed those businesses. And I think what's going to happen is going to be this like divide. Is like we consume the services, but we're not going to be able to create or compete with those huge companies. So if someone has a novel idea, if it's not something that company could easily like replicate, your idea is not going to last. And so I think that moving forward, there's going to be these big companies that are going to make our lives as consumers better. But creators, we're only going to be able to compete by creating products that are based on their services that they already created, rather than being able to create something new. One, we won't have the resources. And B, if we do create something cool, they'll just be like, oh, we have a bigger team, we have bigger resource, we could just create and add it as a feature to our existing product.
I think part of that's true. My counter argument would be, if you read about Microsoft and OpenAI and like how they came to acquire OpenAI, which they acquired 49%, but they really own it. They were trying to do LLMs, and they were just having really bad luck. And I read this whole story about these guys in there, and they're like, man, it's good, but it's not really great. And then OpenAI comes along, and they're like, okay, that's a leapfrogged us. How did they do that? And it's just, they were smarter. And that's why they put their 12 or 50 billion or whatever they put into it to own it, because they couldn't replicate that with all their money and all the technology. This company came around and, kind of perfected that thing. And I think that's always going to be the case with technology, that someone will come around and like, oh, pretty smart. Like, I didn't think of that. And then that will get commoditized and copied and pushed out. But I think all of those types of people come around always in technology. We always think we're at the end of the road. We're really just at the start of the road.
But what's something like interesting you said in that statement? Because I have to put on my conspiracy theory hat, or maybe it's not a conspiracy. But so you said someone really, really smart had to come in. And so there's this interesting book. I don't remember the title, but it's talking about new elites. You know how like back in the day you had the old money and you have these people that had this generational wealth. And now it's shifting to where these elites, it's not like so much techno bros. It's anybody who's like working in the, like a research data scientist, some sort of science where they're making some sort of, discovery that influences like change, like OpenAI and whatever. And so what they're arguing is that the new elite that's going to take over the future are the people that creating these technologies. And because they're top percent of the top 1%, top of the 1%, there's never going to be competition. And so the thing that I'm saying is, where like I see how like OpenAI talks about, like, I don't know if like universal income is the answer, but he's talking about and again, we're talking like 70, 80, 90, 100, 200 years in the future. But like this idea is that there's not like, I'm having a hard time visualizing like how are people going to keep up and have enough relevant work that they could do that like to pay their bills as a job if a lot of stuff is going to be automated. Like there was an interesting video I saw. It's a Tesla robot like folding laundry. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I can't even like it does a terrible job, but I'm like, it's just as good as like a 4-year-old. So you could like, instead of having 4-year-olds like, or 5-year-olds, fold your laundry, you could have robots. It's like,
So let's take my industry, web development. So, and I have the I guess, the privilege of living through the entire age of web development. I'm that old. So like, so from 97 to forward, where we've seen like modern web development. In 97, we had a app out there called FrontPage, where FrontPage it was a website builder, and it was trying to replicate websites since the very beginning of this. And since then, we've had 1,000 CMSs, maybe more, that came and went, and then you have Squarespace. And even to this day, the person doing a Squarespace still has to know HTML to do it. It's like, and that's just the simple part of this. That's the basic of everything. I need a static website that shows off my restaurant. That's the static thing. We're still selling website builders. There's a bunch of them. And the people running those website builders, it's not the guy and the cook in the back of the back of the restaurant that's doing it. It's hiring a marketing firm to hire someone that can build a website with not FrontPage, but Squarespace, Wix, or WordPress or something like that. And I think we're just at the beginning of this road and not the end of the road.
Yeah.
And that's why I think LLMs could be near peak about what they really, really can do. And it's going to evolve into, it's a platform, it's expected feature, know how to do this. We're going to put this into everything. If you're building a CMS, it should have some kind of thing, rewrite this title for me. And it'll just be an expected feature, just like give me some images that I could put on top of this blog article, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think I might just be like more pessimistic. And I feel like for majority, if anybody listening to podcasts, anybody right now, like I think you're good. Yeah. Whatever you decide to do, you're good. We're talking about hypotheticals here. But I feel like one skill that people will need to adapt is this ability to pivot and stay relevant. So being able to kind of see the 100%. Change and where the wind is blowing and being like, within my limit, what can I do to kind of ride the wave and stay? And so for me, like what I've been trying to do is to kind of ask myself, what does the world look like in 5 years, 10 years? And I could be completely wrong, but it's like the things that I'm doing today, what one thing could I add to it that will at least help me to continue to grow with the changes rather than be like, oh, it's game over.
Yeah, I think though, if you drew a chart and you had a chart of like technology inventions since 1990, you could follow one through line through that whole chart up to 2024 is HTTP. So we have HTTP running through this whole thing, and everything springs off that, whether that's an iPhone or it's a website or it's a OpenAI or anything like that. Unless if you don't have web development, OpenAI is useless without the chatbot, and the chatbot's been on a website. And so I still think today, even all those things, it hasn't changed a whole lot. There's a lot of other gizmos in and around this. It's the same thing with the internal combustion engine on a car. It's kind of the same. It's a little more complicated, but
until EVs,
until this, and then we're seeing a change. And say, well, maybe that's going to be something that we're going to go around and change out. But actually, electric cars have been around since the beginning of combustion engines anyway. So, it's been around for a while. It's just that Elon Musk made it, I guess, more cooler, more acceptable, made it cheaper to make or something like that, where it made it possible to like mass produce them. Or we're at a place where we want that versus, a combustion engine car. But like it took a long time to do that. I just don't think we're going to have this overnight change where suddenly someone pays us to sit at home all day long. And if we sign up for universal basic income, I can guarantee you that's going to end.
Yeah.
OpenAI is going to say, yeah, we know we made that contract with you, but like,
kidding.
I'm not feeling it anymore. So you're cut off.
Yeah. I think for me is like, this is something I tell my daughter. It's like AI is now part of like everyday life. You should be like AI literate. Like, back in the day, like when there's people that knew how to read versus people who didn't, it's like who was more literate, like was able to be more successful. I think it's just kind of understanding that and doing that. And one of the things I was thinking about, because there's like, me, I have a coding channel. You also do code related stuff. And I just recently did a poll, like, should people learn to code in 2024? And like 50% or like 40%, it's like a high number. They just want to give up. It's like, oh, it's game over. And it's like, and to me, it's like, how do you, explain to folks that number one, it's not game over because we're not there yet. It's like a lot of people, like they think of like the dark future that may happen. And they think like it's set in stone. And so they're just like, deciding not to do things just based on that. But like to me, like I feel like as long as people keep adapting with the change and like, hey, how could I better use AI tools that exist to be more productive? They have a brighter future than somebody, let's say, who just already either gave up or just not trying to pivot and think about how to use the changing trends to benefit themselves.
When I counsel people about learning to code, it's really not about learning to code. It's like, what are you going to do if you don't? Like, in other words, what's your other plan? Because you have to educate yourself. You have to improve yourself, especially if you're in your 20s at this point. You can't just sit at home and say, well, web development was the only job I could have done, so I'm not doing anything else.
Right.
You know, and so like you have to look at doing this. But I think technology, in my opinion, is just the best one to get into. It pays better. It's into every single industry. It's just better to be in it somehow, some way, versus being uneducated about it. You know, I think the most frustrating thing that I have in my life, and I hope my friends aren't listening, they're in my area, so they're in the 50s, and you know, you go to the parties or whatever, and like a lot of them are just like uneducated about things that it just makes me crazy.
It's a lack of understanding.
Yeah, it's like you know, you're good with computers. I hate that phrase. I just hate it.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? I'm just wondering. Good with computers.
It's
like,
funny.
They like me. Is that what you think they do? Like, you know, but I think we should stay smart and stay educated, and that allows you to roll with the punches or whenever this changing. I think AI is going to be less of a thing that just takes over everything and more of a platform in which you can make money on. And I do think in the next 10 years, there'll be 1 to 2, maybe $3 billion companies that'll be invented because of AI. And 1,000 that we saw at CES, they're just junk. But there's 1 or 2 of them that's going to invent something like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, OpenAI came out of nowhere already.
Came out of nowhere.
So we've seen one.
But
yeah,
I was going to make like a point just came to me, like, because a lot of times when you talk to people, I think that people that say they want to give up on coding is because their perception prior to what's happening now is that in 3 months you could get a job making 6 figures. It's like, no, it takes work and effort. Like, even if you do like a 6-month like intensive bootcamp and you get hired, that's like still the beginning of your journey, and you got to continue to work and improve and educate yourself. And then like somebody said to me, like, well, maybe I should be a plumber. I'm like, bro, like, you know how hard it is to become a plumber? Like, you got to first learn.
I say, sure, be a plumber. Yeah, it's like, it's another choice.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's also not easy. Like, I've done, like, I did construction a long time ago. You got to do like, what is it called? Where you follow a plumber and you have
apprentice.
Yeah. And it's like, it takes a long time. And like, before you get the big bucks. And so it's like, I tell people, whatever is worth doing that's going to give you a good reward, it's hard. And you just have to
You don't just wake up one day and you're like, today I'm a plumber. Yeah. That's not how it works. Right. You go like, well, today I think I'm going to be an airline pilot. Like, let's just go be a pilot today.
They get lots of money.
Exactly. So, a month's worth of training. Boom, I'm in.
And here's the funny story. I wanted to be a pilot, and I looked into like the requirements and the time it takes. And when I decided I wanted to do it, I was already after my 30s, and I realized that just the amount of time that it takes, I will not qualify even after I go through all the stuff because I'll be too old. Like, there's just this long process. And it's like, sometimes just stuff takes a long time. And instead of people trying to be like, what's the quick fix? It's like, you decide what you want to do and you just put in the work required. And I can't pronounce his name. He's one of the OpenAI people, but he also like teaches at Stanford or whatever the university, like Andre something. And he basically said, it's like, listen, like, people always ask me, like, how do you get into AI? How do you get into this? How do you get into that? And like, the answer is like, you just need to put in your time. Whatever it is, you just have to put in your time. And that's what I think people have to understand. So
we tell every student at Coder Foundry's commitment to craft is the thing.
Yeah.
It's not about learning whatever the stack reteach is. We have an opinion on that stack.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's commitment to craft.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand about me and Coder Foundry is like, if I decide that .NET isn't the way to go, I would change tomorrow. And I think a lot of people would be pissed off that I changed. Oh, you sold out. I'm like, well, no, that's what commitment to craft means.
Yeah.
You see it, you change, you move on, you improve your skill set, and you put it out there in the marketplace, and you make it. And I think a lot of people just think that this stuff's going to take over, but they just want a magic pill, I guess, to get a job. And I think that you should be educated in this arena. So a long way to short. I don't know how we got on this tangent, but like
these deep thoughts that arise.
Deep thoughts about AI and
AI and life
universal
in
income.
general. It's good. Anyway,
Copilot launching for $20 a month. That's
$20 a month.
you were supposed to move us to the
The
next
world is
topic.
over.
I'm gonna blame Kevin. Kevin, you were supposed to go. All right, next topic, everybody.
I'm gonna cut almost all of that. So
That's a whole separate
No, I won't.
podcast
But that's-
right there.
Mid
but it will be cut right there now. Okay, an upsetting topic to finish us off.
Okay.
Upsetting for me anyway, and Sarah isn't here, so I know she'd be upset too. She can remotely come in upset next week, maybe. But one of my favorite apps, a previous Not No recommendation, Artifact, is shutting down. If you go to their website right now, it is just a little banner that says they're ceasing operations January 12th, and they are moving on to doing something else. So Artifact came out kind of last year. I don't know what month it is, what month it came out, earlier last year, I think. I've been using it for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, something like that. But it's running, apparently the app's going to run until sometime the end of Feb, but they're saying they're ceasing operations in January. So it's kind of, January was the date, but they're going to run until Feb, I guess. I've gone cold turkey. I've turned it off. I'm like, if it's going to go away, I'm not going to bother watching the ship sink. I'm just going to cut it off at this point. But here was their quote. They said they have built something that a core group of users love, but we have concluded that the market opportunity isn't big enough to warrant continued investment in this way. So what happened here? Let me talk about some of the features first, and the reason why I've been using this. This is a killer app. This is like the creme de la creme of news aggregation apps in my eye. So the algorithm that it used was really, really good. It learned what news you like and fed you more of that news that you liked. It was really good at that. That was its number one feature for me. It had and it added a whole bunch of new features like AI written headlines or rewritten headlines. So if you saw something that looked like clickbait, so the headline didn't represent the article, you could mark it as clickbait, and it would give you a rewritten AI headline that represented the actual article. If enough people flagged it, they would also then rewrite it on a system-wide level. So nobody got the clickbait headline. You all got the actual good headline. Such a killer feature in my eyes. AI voice reading, so you can have any article that it fed into it could be read to you by an AI voice. Super good feature. And then they added a social feature kind of later on where you could create your own posts to share. So you had mixed in kind of social, your kind of think of you could write kind of a Medium style article and you could have that shared in with stuff from the New York Times or whatever, however you trained your kind of algo, it fed you more of what you liked. It was super good. So apparently it was only a team of 8 people. So small team. It never grew past 8. And they're moving on to build different things is what they've said. Here's the thing. This application was named the Everyday Essential App of the Year on the Google Play Store. So this is technically like an award-winning application, right? So in my eyes, this was the best aggregated news app that is out there. If this couldn't survive, what can?
In
What
news
happens to
aggregation?
Yeah, I'm guessing so, yeah. This is a killer app. They had everything. It was amazing, but it doesn't survive. Why doesn't it survive?
I think it was kind of like what I was trying to explain earlier, is that the business model that, if someone creates an app, if it's something that could be easily replicated by somebody else, and it's not novel, it has no future. And so I'm looking, they have their Verge article and they're talking about the features, AI powered article summaries, the ability to comment on articles within Artifact, the ability to mark articles as clickbait and rewrite them using AI. You could right now go and use ChatGPT OpenAI and recreate this app yourself. And so if I could do it,
kind of, but I don't think you can. I don't think that's the argument.
No, I can tell you,
I don't think
I know you can't, because we tried to do this at the same time they brought this thing out.
Just saying.
No, we actually
for
wrote
Kevin,
a thing
I'm
called
make
News.
it for you to use.
Make
I will.
I want it.
I'm gonna do it.
Please
I'm gonna do
do. Please. I want it.
Maybe we're not as good as programmers, but we had an app that we were experimenting with last year, right around the time Artifacts come out. We called it Newsbeat, and we were trying to do this. Then Artifact comes out, and we're like, I don't,
Yep.
And we were trying to actually summarize the news based on aggregate. And it was really difficult to do using OpenAI API. these guys did a pretty good job. But then the more and more I thought about it was like, okay, I want to roll this out. How do we pay? Would someone pay for this? And we did come to the conclusion that no one would probably pay for it. And I think that's what they found out, is that this type of app, if it's not free, it's just not worth it.
And that's the thing. It was free, and there were no ads on it. So that's the issue. I just think it ultimately came down to they couldn't monetize it. They had no business model. It was an amazing app with no business model.
Exactly.
I think it's an interesting point you just brought up, like thinking about, because I'm thinking about like how I would create this app, and I just know to run it would be like, it will have high cost. And,
yes,
and so like, and that makes perfect sense. And so it's like, not only is it easily recreatable, but there's also a cost,
a heavy cost
that you're taking in with that. And this is also another reason why you're able to have Microsoft have these services, because they're eating the costs on them. You know what I mean? And like OpenAI, the free ChatGPT version, because I have an app that I'm working on, which, because I'm sick and tired of watching long ass YouTube videos. And so I wanted to create an app which basically tells me, should I actually invest time in this video? And it summarizes, you could take notes on it and like whatever. And I'm like using ChatGPT 4. I'm like, man, if I had users on this, they would break me. Like, unless I was charging them, that was making up the difference. Like, and so like, how do you scale? And that's like another point. Like, unless you're a big company, like how do you, and it's.
Here's the thing though. I don't think they ever tried to. It's like they built this thing and it's an amazing app. They never tried to monetize it, because you can monetize this from two ways, right? You monetize it from the business side of things. You run ads, right? Or you get consumers to pay. And we know that's based on Twitter. That's kind of difficult, right? Because you don't get enough money, I think, to cover the costs. I think that's probably the issue. But they never offered me they never said like, hey, would you pay $10 a month? Like, that never came up, because I probably would have done. It was that good of an app.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good service. To me, like, I'm kind of curious. Like, I want to know the reasons why now, because I would pay $10 for it, and because it saves you time and you don't have to sift through nonsense, which time is money, like they say, and so, yeah, it's wild.
And I just think maybe they were purely technology guys and they never really had a business behind it, and I mean, honestly, the technology is always the easy part. It's the hard part is monetization, customer acquisition, and customer retention. And like, that's the hardest thing about running a business. It's like, yeah, we can make whatever, but like, how do you get people to buy it? And so that takes marketing and effort, and maybe they just weren't cut out for that part of it. Or maybe they learned something and they said, that's more valuable, and this thing's a waste of time now.
Yeah.
And they just shut it down. And I think sometimes you do, as a company, you may pivot. You're like, I like what we're doing there, but I'm going to do something different now, because we've learned something else. The fact that they had these algorithms and they figured that out, they'll probably pivot into something else.
Let's make bets to see when Microsoft is going to release this feature. 6 months, 3 months.
Well, they didn't buy it.
Or buy it.
They did.
Well, they haven't bought it. Nobody's bought it. They've just abandoned it. They've basically just abandoned it. So here's the thing. Like, Apple has Apple News, right? Which is like, basically it's the same. It's the Apple version of this, right? It's the Apple
Google
version
News does exist too.
But it doesn't have the features this thing has. The algorithm is nowhere near as good. Nowhere even close. The AI features that it has doesn't have them. Won't read stories. Won't do anything. That Apple wants to sell you one that Apple, like the News Plus version, which basically takes you, gives you stories that are behind paywalls, right? So it'll give you like New York Times stories, Guardian stories, those kind of things that are behind a paywall generally, and it feeds you those into there. But it doesn't have the features this thing has. What I want the Apple stuff on the Apple app, but I want it to have all these features. Like, please, like, why doesn't Apple just like embed this stuff now? That's what I want.
Yeah.
I guess it's expensive to run the LLMs unless Apple has their own in-house, which I think they do. I think they're working on it.
I was going
maybe we'll see it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the one thing that people don't talk about is at scale, it's very expensive. So unless you're like a huge company that able to eat up the cost, it's very hard to create a service that could work at scale and financially make sense. And that's why I feel like there's this big push to making more efficient, like chips that are able to run and compute all the data stuff faster than like the GPUs, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's where you're going to see the next iteration of this is like people competing with NVIDIA, making chips that compete with the Qualcomm, Broadcom, all these other companies out there. Qualcomm had the most patents than any U.S. company or any company in the world last year. And so you can see that this kind of these chipsets manufacturers aren't going to go away. I'm hoping Intel will come up and make something, AMD will make something. And what that does is drive these chip prices way down. And we as a consumer benefit from that. But I think we will run OpenAI on device within the next 3 years. Something very competitive.
I agree. But here's all I want. Apple, just give me this.
I want Artifact.
Give me News Plus 2. That's all I want. I want News. I want Apple News version 2, please. And it needs to be just like Artifact. Thank you very much. That's all I want, Apple.
And it could be that they made the play of like, we're just going to get a bunch of users and get to a certain scale and try to sell it. And maybe they went through that process of trying to sell it.
Maybe.
And no one bought it. And they just had to shut it down because, you know, they only had a runaway for 1 year or 2 years or something like that.
It wasn't even a year.
I know. So they didn't really have a runway for this. They couldn't raise money on it. And no one bought it. So they just shut it down. But I think these guys will go somewhere else and make another app.
They've already said they are. That's the reason they shut it down.
And they're probably going to reuse what they learned because if they weren't going to, they could make it open source and we could just use it. But
so I think they'll be okay.
Kevin's not okay.
But I need what I
need.
Exactly.
Kevin needs to be okay.
I'm not worried about them. I want my news app back, damn it. Let's talk recommendations for the week then. Let's go to our null, not null section. So just go down the list. Bobby, what you got? What you recommending this week?
I'm back on the Peloton, so I have to recommend Peloton as a great. I know it's like a 2020 COVID type thing, but like Peloton's still an amazing bike. I have an original Peloton bike, still running well. I do FTP tests on it, which is training based. I have my FTP world record for me, personal best this week, which is great. And I've been doing this for like 3 years, so I'm avoiding, I'm getting better with age, I guess.
That's awesome. So is this a subscription then? You have to pay.
You do, and it runs on it's really cool. They have a tablet that runs on front of the bike, but the tablet's integrated into the bike. It has lots of metrics on it. It has leaderboards when you're riding. Apparently it has bots. I'm convinced it does. Super expensive bike, but I will say this about the bike. Not all bikes are made equal. And if you've ridden indoor bikes before and you get on a Peloton bike, it's more akin to riding a very high-end road bike versus a crappy indoor bike that wiggles. And even me, who's a big person, kind of heavy, that's why I'm riding the bike. It doesn't shake around or move. It's really stable. It's a great platform. And then the training on it is really good. Really good. I mean, like they're kind of like production value of the train is really good. So
cool.
But $24.95 plus whatever it is per month. You can if you got to finance your bike, it's pretty expensive. But like
you get a free water bottle for $1.
There you go.
Free water bottle.
Awesome. Paul, what you got?
2, 1, because I don't know if you tried it yet. I'll put it in the chat here. You got to try this air car VR experience. It's old, but basically you fly around in VR in a cyberpunk city. It's just very cool, chill experience. Pretty awesome. But
nice.
What I'm really excited about, and you do have to be a little bit techy to use it, but it's not that complex. There's this new UE VR mod by this gentleman called Prey Dog, which I shared in the link, which allows you to take a lot of the Unreal Engine games and turn them into VR. And it has like different settings where you could make it either like if it's a third-person game, you could make it first-person game. And so there's this game that I've been playing. Good Lord, I can't even remember the name anymore. I think it's called Outsiders or something like that. And it's a cool like game. And I was like, I wish there was a VR version, but there hasn't been. And so this mod allows you to turn that game into VR. There's another game called Ready or Not. It's like a police like simulator thing, which is pretty insane. Which very high stress because you play as a police officer and you got to tell people like, put your hands up, like, and then they like put their hands up, like make you feel like they're arrested, and then they just turn around and stab you. So it's very high stress. And so you could play that in VR, which is even more stressful. So I'm like, my heart goes out to all our police officers who have to deal with all this crazy stuff. But it's kind of cool because the biggest complaint is like there's a lot of crappy VR games, and now you could take non-VR games and make them VR games. That's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
So do you
That's
walk
cool.
in the bass store and the guy jumps in the giant aquarium in your Ready or Not game? I don't know if you saw that story.
No, not yet. No.
Oh,
I have to Google that.
Where was this? Florida?
Probably.
I don't know. It had to be in the southeast because it's bass
Okay.
stores, but they have big
Probably.
aquariums, giant aquariums, and like the story the week before, some guy caught one of the fish in the aquarium and took it out of the store, and this other guy decides I'm going to go swimming in it without my clothes, and that's a good plan,
Jesus.
you know. And the police are in there trying to tell, "Sir, get out of the aquarium." It's kind of funny.
It's the aquarium, break the glass.
It's funny. Okay, my recommendation for this week, I switched up my Wi-Fi. Finally, I've come into the 21st century, I guess. I had a previous. What did I have? I had the Orbi system before, mesh. So I had a decent network before, but it was an Orbi mesh Wi-Fi 5. So I upgraded to the TP-Link Deco Wi-Fi 6E mesh network. It immediately gave me faster speeds on the Wi-Fi throughout the entire house in spots that I already got decent Wi-Fi. So I get, right now, I still have cable Wi-Fi. I have 300 megabits down. And I'm getting 300 plus on the Wi-Fi now, when I was only getting 200 and something before in a lot of places in the house. So it's the coverage is so much better. So I'm going to know for sure next week because I'm getting gigabit internet. I'm finally getting fiber at home. So I'm super excited about that. So I'm hoping I can push a lot of this fiber. The theory is I can push most of that gigabit across this Wi-Fi 6E network, and we'll see next week. But right now, it's super easy setup, way tinier units than the Orbi units are as well, much smaller. And yeah, easy setup, just plug them in, followed the little prompts on the phone on a smart app, and got it to work. And it was really, really easy. And way cheaper than the Orbi 6E. The Orbi 6E, for a two pack, they want like $1,500. I think it was 2 or 3 pack. $1,500. This is less than $300.
And the differences between the two are minor because I was looking at these today.
Yes.
Yes. I've since just put a mesh network in our office here. I used a different brand, but I wish I didn't went this route.
Yeah,
they make a holder for these things, by the way, Kevin. You can mount them on the wall.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
I might have to do that.
TP-Link mount. You just Google it. It's right there on Amazon, and it's made to sit on it, and so you can mount it wherever you want.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's cool. That's the one thing with these is like, trying to find where to put them is kind of interesting.
Down there, that right there, they have them different brands, but I think that'll put it in there.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, they're a lot smaller than, like I say, smaller than the other ones. They're a little bit more inconspicuous. They don't look so bad. They're little round units as opposed to these big things that the Orbis are. They're a little bigger. These are probably, I don't know how big they are. 8 inches, 10 inches maybe tall. Kind of small.
As long as you can get power to it, you can mount it anywhere, and then it can be out of the way. It doesn't have to sit on a desk or anything like that.
Yep. Yeah, but definitely recommend the difference between going from a 5 to a 6E. Definitely made a difference. And like I say, if you're getting fiber too, if you have fiber internet and you're paying for a gig, like upload and download, like you need to go to a 6E because otherwise you're going to be capped. You're paying for something you can't actually use across Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and some of them will be only 20 meg downloads. Wow. It's kind of slow.
Yeah.
Because the device just can't do it. And if you're not running cables everywhere and you're running Wi-Fi, this is your only choice. You need a 6E network, I think, a 6E one.
Exactly.
Definitely.
It seems to be the new kind of standard at the minute. There is a 7. There's a lot of 7 devices at CES this year. So there's more Wi-Fi 7 devices coming out. And Wi-Fi 7 is going to get ratified this year, whatever. So 7's going to come out. But that's like, you can buy them, but they're like $2,000 for a mesh network. They're very, very expensive. And you're not going to see the bandwidth throughput right now because there's no devices that use it. So this is the sweet spot right now. If you're looking to replace some Wi-Fi, this is where you go. Go mesh, go 6E, you'll be golden. Well, that's it for this week's episode of the Not Know Podcast. I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things if you could. If you made it this far, please let a friend know about the podcast. Tell them how awesome it is and get them to download it and listen to it. That will be doing us a huge favor. And then leave us a review and a rating somewhere. 5 stars would be very much appreciated. We would definitely love to do that. You can also drop us an email. Where can they drop us an email to?
The Not Know Podcast at AOL.com.
That is it. The Not Know Podcast at AOL.com. You heard that correctly. That is at AOL.com. We are cutting edge. We are bleeding edge with tech right here at the Not Know Podcast. And that's it. We'll catch everybody next week.